later for me than usual. Which is fine. I just want to kind of keep things going. And as this day unfolded, it was just one of those things where it got later and later in the day, and I ate dinner and everything, and I then finally got to this hour, and I said, you know what, despite it being later than I usually go live, I'm gonna go live. Hey, Jelly Beans, what's going on? I'm gonna go live, and I'm just gonna do a stream. I'm just gonna do a brief update. Hey, Rugged Source, what's going on? Emoji dabs to the wind. I love it. I love it. Hey, Jelly Beans, first in the live chat. Gold medal onto the Rugged Source. Grabbing that silver. I'm on my phone, so the live chat, comes up. It doesn't, stay for me. So if I miss, the bronze medal winner or whatever, Jonaside, there you go, boom, and there we go. And if then Mario Heat grabs the honorable mention, and I'm covered. I don't need to worry about it. So I'm not going to do the whole, galloping intro, repeating the whole everything from first the earth cools and the dawn of man type thing. We go back in time and it's this and it's the. I'm going to assume that everybody who shows up for this sort of stream is kind of on board and kind of is up to speed. And if you're not, then I would suggest that you watch one of the earlier streams where I talk about the meta RPG and all that stuff before this one, or don't, and make it even more of an experimental, confusing mind masterpiece. So, assuming that this is like giving myself permission to speak to the initiated and giving myself permission to know and understand that the people that are going to watch this video are more likely than not to be those people who have already watched the videos that have come before and therefore do not need to go through the whole spiel about time travel and the theory behind it and the 20-year and all the nostalgia loops and all yada. So what are the updates? Number one, just a bit of diversion for you. A portrait of William Burroughs, El Hombre Invisible, by Barry Miles. Revised and updated edition, first published in 2002. First published in paperback in 1993 by Virgin Publishing, putting it right on the 30-year nostalgia loop. First published in Great Britain in 1992. So it was originally from 1992, then in 2002, but we get a first published in paperback in 1993 that puts it right on the 30-year nostalgia loop for us. But hey, if we still had that 92 and 2002, and we'll talk about that. Look, let me do the first thing and say this. Part of what I wanted to talk about in this video was the notion of this. There's so much that I've experienced in first coming to YouTube and my last channels and, this one. Though the context is kind of different with, in the notion of of doing things as an RPG versus doing things as a religion or as, marketing oneself as a spiritual healer or practitioner or a tarot card reader, whatever. It's still this bizarre thing of, as an artist or creative person, being like, or as an explorer, being told that you have to come to this thing called the marketplace with yourself or your quote unquote product and say, I am this, or this is my thing, this is my object, this is my product, and it does this, or I do this. And you can fit me in this box, and you got to be marketable, and you can be marketable. You have to tell people what you do and how you do it and what it is and blah. And so I'm doing this thing of this meta RPG, which is essentially the blurring and the dispersal of the lines and the dividers within my own head between the information that came in to my head during my life from various tributaries. And I'm saying that I'm in my head taking the boundaries between the things that came in marked spiritualism and religiosity and metaphysics, and those things that were labeled science fiction and fantasy and role playing game. And I'm getting rid of those boundaries. And I'm accepting the fact that I can let the information go back and forth and inform each other. And I'm not saying that I'm the first person to engage in these sort of actions or activities of blurring these lines, or that in the postmodern milieu or sense that these sort of behaviors can't be seen in various other disciplines. It doesn't matter to be in, and that goes right back to this whole notion of marketability. I no longer am attached to any sort of ego game of needing to be some sort of originator or proving some sort of point of doing. I'm not really a big believer anymore in any sort of notion of anybody having done anything at all original, ever, ever, right? Really, particularly, and even if those things that have been done that can be qualified as or classified as quote unquote original or haven't been done for the first time, those things in retrospect, considering the ease with which people can replicate them after the fact, it doesn't really see whatever. It doesn't really matter. We don't need to go that far afield. So all of that is a prelude to say I am not finished figuring out how this quote unquote meta RPG works, or how my even the component parts like the time travel technology works. So in discussions with people of this, and understanding myself of why I'm tied to these things like the 20-year nostalgia loop and it going right to 2003 or right to 1983, a lot of that is just predicated on some on a real kind of urge or desire on my part to make sure that I don't make mistakes or kind of pollute the waters, and I'm trying to do something with some sort of exactitude, but it's a kind of imaginary game. And then when I think and reflect about, well, how these things are supposed to work or how they would actually work, and I think, well, it really couldn't work. That it's not that I'm thinking that that something happens at the stroke of midnight on January 31st of 2002, that all of a sudden really does take information from that calendar year, and then all of a sudden does something to it metaphysically or physically or astrologically or astrally to mark it or somehow in the matrix to make it work differently for this quote unquote chrono magic that I have. No, all this is it couldn't possibly be that. No, the notion of keeping track of these chronological years, there's easy demarcations to know what stuff is from what time and what stuff is from another time. So I don't find myself, working with some book and then all of a sudden realize, well, hot diggity damn, there's no way that this could have possibly, to make sure that it's not just all just up in the air and just let's all just pretend. I'll just play a game called Time Travel and I'll just pretend that any book I'm reading is from 1902. And oh my God, isn't it incredible that they invented Star Wars in 1902? Well, that might be a different game, but I think it would be harder for me to imagine that scenario. But it's easier for me to realize, hey, honey, maybe you don't need to go crazy about making sure that I don't think you need to pack up the books from 1992 just because it's 2023, right? I think we could say that some of this stuff, also a lot of these rules that I had, like the rules that apply to music, like, you know, you listen to a song is 3.5 minutes of duration. If it's a pop song, if it's one of these like experimental things, it's 8.5 minutes, 12 minutes, it's whatever. But a book, it takes a long time to read, a fair amount of time to read. A role playing game, these editions of these role playing games, like first edition or second edition of some of these role playing games, they stick around for a couple of years. Like a PlayStation 2, the PlayStation 2 technology that was, they kept that technology around for what, 5, 6 years, 10 years maybe. So some things we might not need to move so fast or realize that we can hold on to certain things. I really think it's about knowing and understanding that maybe the things that are from prior to years, especially if we have personal attachment to them or knowledge of them or experience of them, that maybe they can stick around a lot longer. We can hold on to them, especially if knowing that we can do that or hold on to them means that we can avoid, any sort of need to, buy more stuff or feel the need to buy more stuff, or makes us understand that we maybe have more time to hang out with the stuff that we have. Also, yeah, I gotta tell you something. This is something interesting. I did the time jump to 2003 way prior to this year. I started going and experimenting with time jumps to other years in 2020. It was in 2020 that I started getting bored early with going back to the year 2000, because the year 2000 I started getting really bored with it. So that was when I first started going back to 1995 and 2008, which was a big year for me, and doing all sorts of things. I don't know if it was in 2020 that I would have gone back to 2003 for the first time, but I know it was when I first started jumping around, one of the first years that I jumped to that wasn't a specific quote unquote power year for me, 1995, 2008, some year that I specifically had some sort of connection to or relationship with, was 2003, that I had kind of gone on to on a kind of a LARP, kind of just accidentally. I'd seen that I'd wanted to see the movie Underworld, with Kate Beckinsale, the vampire versus werewolf movie, and it was from 2003. And I was like, well, if I start watching stuff from 2003 and just go to 2003, it'll be okay. I think it was like supposed to be in the year 2000. And I just kind of basically was like, we'll just kind of flub it. And I just, so I started to go to 2003 early because 2000s like basically sucked. So I think I was basically like, 2000 sucks. So I think the theory was that I was going to fast forward through the 2000s because it was such a blowjobby time. Like I was going to go to whatever. And why I bring that up, we'll get to the William Burroughs things, but I actually have stuff from. Here's a Game Boy Advance. I didn't. This is my old Game Boy Advance. I have this actually from 2000. I remember because this is the Game Boy Advance I took to Key West, Florida, in 2001, which was a flight, which was their version of Fantasy Fest in Key West. Yeah, Fantasy Fest in Key West, Florida. It's like their version of Mardi Gras. It was like right after September 11th, and so I remember I had this Game Boy, but when I was doing, when I remember when I was going, I was looking at like mid 1990s stuff, I think, because I remember doing something with Judge Dredd or whatever, and I got like the Game Boy game for Judge Dredd like maybe 1 or 2 years ago. And I have this game. I haven't even opened it yet. Tales of Fantasia that I got a while ago, years ago, on the time jump. Like I said, 2020 from 2003. Look at these calendar years. It goes. It's 1994, 1998, 2003. So 1998 is 25 years ago, and 2003 is 20 years ago. So this must have been like reissued. This must have been issued on like the friggin' Famicom in 1994. Then they must have issued it on the Game Boy in 1998, and then they must have reissued it on like, or like the Nintendo, like Super Nintendo, like in 1998 or whatever, and then they reissued it in 2003 on the Game Boy Advance. So there you go. So we have that. And then I have a whole bunch of other games that I know. Some of these I have from back in the day. And so they would be like from original from the time, like maybe not 2003 like on the spot, but like around that time. Some of them, might be later. But here's one that says 1996. I don't know if that, because the Game Boy Advance I thought was like from 2000, but this is 1996. This Yu-Gi-Oh thing. I have no idea. Here's Scooby Doo Mystery Mayhem. I think this is 2003. I would have gotten that because me and my daughters are really into we're into the PS2 Scooby Doo games. There's Dungeons and Dragons: Eye of the Beholder. I got this back in the day for the Game Boy. I remember this back in my old law office before I got fired from my first job. So this was probably circa like 2008. Final Fantasy 1 and 2. This is like I know where I'm stuck on Final Fantasy 1. So this is like one of my first Game Boy Advance purchases from like back in the day. So we still have my original save file there. We could try and busting out. I could believe that this is from 2003 or like around there because this is not from my original collection. So this would have been something that I got on like the buy going back. Final Fantasy Tactics would have been something that I would have had like old school, so it would have been like might have been 2000 ish. Advance Wars 2 I had back in the day, I know, so I don't know. Here's Pinball of the Dead. What I don't know what year this is. But here's the thing, like I put batteries in this thing today. So we can figure this out. This thing doesn't have a lighted screen. So this is I have the Game Boy Advance SP, which is the one that's like the flip one that has the lighted screen. But this one is cool because it's got the headphone out, and I've got these old school. I don't know if they still work. It's been so long since I, booted the system up. But back in the day, like back in like 2000, 2000 and such, there were these people that made these homebrew cartridges for the Game Boy to turn them into like synthesizers. So this is one called Nano Voice. Here's the famous one called Nano Loop. This thing's like I got the load. I got the Game Boy screen, but nothing's happening. So we'll see what happens. Do I gotta press something? What's going on? Uh-oh. See if I do one of these. You never know. Let's see. I don't think the Game Boy turns on, so let's see what happens. Maybe we'll try to. All right, so you know what? It's the stream might be giving me a little bit of trouble. So what we're gonna do is, what I'll do is this: is that I'll just tell you that I love you, and tell you that we'll try SpongeBob and Bikini Bottom. Let's try this. We got this one from 2003. Let's see if this one will work. Yep. Okay. So we got this. We got SpongeBob. We got SpongeBob from 2003. So we got that. But that's not what I wanted to show you. Battle for Bikini Bottom. So we got that. So we got something going on from 2003. We got that. I also have this. This is Mother 1 and 2. One of these turned, I think this was one, I think number 1, or I can't remember if it was Mother 1 or Mother 2 that got turned into Earthbound. One of these is from 1989 and one of these from 1994, so they bookend kind of. The 1989 one we can play. Those aren't supposed to be for the Game Boy Advance. Someone bootlegged them and put them up to the Game Boy Advance. What I also wanted to talk to you about is this. Also, I watched. It's like on the spirit of going a little bit earlier. I developed 249 spells off of Fast Times at Ridgemont High tonight. That's a record. I normally am getting like I'm that's I think that's the most. I watched Star Trek Wrath of Khan from 1982 and only got 58 last night. Then I watched Star Trek Nemesis from 2002, which is basically, oh, by the way, they didn't remake Star Trek II Wrath of Khan once. They remade it twice. Because Star Trek Nemesis from 2002, FYI in case you're curious, is Wrath of Khan on the 20-year nostalgia loop. Absolutely, without a doubt. So when you have the new Star Trek, whatever, Onto Darkness, whatever the fuck, we don't dare call it, don't call it Wrath of Khan, whatever, on the 30-year nostalgia loop, it actually might just be, because Star Trek Nemesis was from 2002, I think it's probably just it's just Star Trek Nemesis on the 20-year nostalgia loop, which is just Wrath of Khan on the 20-year nostalgia loop too. So it's just a factory of Khan versus you know, but now they're just messing up with the now it's just that's metaphysical genetic engineering. Look at what they're doing, what they do with what they did with what they're doing with the captains and the adversaries with Khan. Khan is literally supposed to be from the year 1996. Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan. He's from He's the product of late 20th century genetic engineering. He's from 1996 in cryogenic freeze, the USS Botany Bay. They've been frozen. Me and my men have been frozen since 1996 in cryogenic sleep. He was a king on Earth when? In 1996. Then in Star Trek Nemesis in 2002, spoiler alert, what does Picard have to fight? He has to fight his fucking clone. A product of what? Genetic engineering. Designed to do what? Create a superior fighting, guy. Everyone's got to fight their shadow. Oh my god. Do you know what I mean? How do you fight this? And it goes right to the fucking end. When I did the spells for Star Trek Nemesis, the number of the spells that were rewind, reboot, repeat, do it again, it was insane. But I got 64 spells off that one, 58 spells off Star Trek 2. But how many spells did I get off Fast Times at Ridgemont High? 240 fucking 9. I got off Fast Times at Ridgemont High too. And why was I so interested in going back to 1982? I'll tell you the fuck why. I don't, let me stay on till now because we want to introduce this because this is another grand concept. Yo, yo, yo. It's the ubiquity of the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. The ubiquity of the standard Dungeons and Dragons is not just the number one fantasy role playing game in the world. Whenever, it doesn't matter if they ever become number two. It is the Adam and Eve. It is the mitochondrial Eve of all role playing games. The number of direct descendants from Dungeons and Dragons is insane. But so I'm going to say is this: that if we're trying to travel through time, or like when we talked about the applications of spells to the fighting to the fighting fantasy characters, and we're trying to talk about, if I'm thinking about what people should learn or know about in order to have like the maximum benefit. Hold on, where is it? Oh, this is my original Dungeons and Dragons base Dungeons and Dragons set from 1983. The player's manual, the dungeon master's rulebook, and I guess the original one of the original um, adventures for it. And you see, this is the revised by Frank Menser version. The versions of Dungeons and Dragons, it's like it first came out in 1974, then it was revised in 1975. Then there was a major revision by a guy named Dr. Eric Holmes, that's known as the Holmes Basic Set, that a lot of people refer to. And then there was another set. Then there was this that was came out in 1983, and many people like kind of talk about like this OSR, this old school revival. Many people talk about the version of Dungeons and Dragons that they grew up with, and actually go to clones, retro clones of the specific version that they grew up with. Anyway, this is the 1983 version. All versions of Dungeons and Dragons basically have the same start, always the same, with ability scores, the same core ability scores. Let me show you. Also, this gal, this drawn by, I guess his name is Larry Elmore. This was like Anton LaVey talks about like erotic impressions, like when things like imprint on your brain. So if I got this in like, I wouldn't have got this in 1983. I think I would have gotten this like in 1985. So I would have been like 10. Oh my God, do I remember this gal? This gal, and I think like her hat, like the way it crosses over her forehead. Totally, with the long black hair, like totally influences me, and like chicks with bangs. Absolutely, absolutely. But anyway, the basic ability scores: strength, dexterity, wisdom, intelligence, charisma, generated, strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma, generated by the roll of, three six-sided dice, four, and then drop one, three six-sided dice, generating a score between 3 and 18, and those scores will eventually adjust the core mechanic of Dungeons and Dragons, which is the roll of a d20 dice to determine success, a test of one of these abilities, you know? And then there's saving throws. And then look, the bottom line is this: is that all differences between versions of Dungeons and Dragons, first edition versus second edition versus third edition versus the most radically different version, fourth edition versus fifth edition, all differences of the editions all take place after the basic understanding of the core attributes, the fact that they're going to originally start out between 3 and 18, the fact that the determination of those attributes are going to determine what classes you can classify, could, qualify for, and they will determine, you know, how good you're going to be, and how you're going to do on these tests, and how your test roles are going to be modified, basically. Meaning that if you generate a character with one of using these stats, and put these spells on one of these characters using basically these stats, you basically have like kind of like a quintessentially generic role playing character that you will be able to understand and see fitting into this world, that world, the other world, so many worlds, and certainly so many worlds across the realm and across the scores of Dungeons and Dragons. And what I had done is I put in my bag all the various different versions of Dungeons and Dragons to talk about how they variously strike against the nostalgia loop that we're talking about. So that's from 1983. Here's my version of the second edition Player's Handbook that I told you that I was so impressed when I got, because I didn't get this to use in the nostalgia loop. I thought, okay, it could apply because it's from I knew it was from 1989. My freshman year in high school started in 1989. But this is the 10th printing that was came out in August of 1993. My birthday's in August, so I was very impressed by that. And I graduated high school in 1993. So this second edition Player's Handbook, though I didn't play second edition back in the day, I'd already kind of given up on role playing games in pursuit of like just kind of actively pursuing Satan in the form of heavy metal and occultism and sex and chicks and all that jazz and drugs, getting high, whatever. But love it that I'm going back, and the fact that this Player's Handbook kind of covers my whole high school career, and that it ended in '93. Therefore, landing right on the 30-year nostalgia loop meant like it was like manna from heaven. It was like a kiss by the gods. Whether it's just pure synchronicity or pure chance, it's a pure chance that allows me to jump on it and say, look, again, from the 80s into the 90s now. We go, and essentially it's the same. Yes, the things that happen afterwards, after the calculation of the abilities, after the introduction of the state, yes, the races change. Yes, so much changes afterwards. But the beginning genetics are the same. The start is the same. It begins at the exact same place with the exact same core abilities and the exact same premise of those core abilities, what their range is, and what they're going to do. The fact that if they're low, they're going to affect your skill checks badly, and if they're high, they're going to affect them positively. I mean, to the degree that they're going to modify up or down will be determined by the various editions of the game that you might play. But, and when we talk about the ubiquity of this playset, now look, here we get to 1985. Now, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, this is the first edition of Dungeons and Dragons. So we're actually going back in time. That was from 1989 to 93. This is from 1985. So if you were working with 1983, I would tell you don't work with this. You're going to be mixing up the time loops. It'll be crazy. We'll have to wait another 2 years before we can really work with this stuff in earnest, unless we're working with this stuff in regards to 1993. I could create a character using this rule set and use them in a 1993 with 1993 spells. But then it gets kind of. That's why then it gets kind of. How do you keep track of it? And doesn't it make much more sense to keep it tight? Keep it tight. So I'm much more inclined to say I might just put this on the side for a while to wait just a little while until it may becomes more fruititious, more better. Though I want to say this also. This period of doing the time loop, really, I think maybe for me, just might have to be the time loops don't always the chrono magic isn't always tied to the time loops for me. Obviously, I talked about jumping around to different years at different points of time, and I talked about the notion of power years. I don't think that I'm going to have to wait till 2025 before I look at my original Unearthed Arcana from my youth, or work with it, or use characters, or put spells, or watch a movie from 1985. Because will have reasons to work with 1985, maybe for a reason or something. I don't know. But for now, I'm preoccupied with doing this whole 2023 working. So the demonstrative purposes serve to say there's that which is approved during this time of working, and there's that which is disapproved. At this time, we wear white and not red. Well, why don't we wear red? Well, because the theory is this, and the other thing. And those that say that these color theories and these things are nonsense and they hold us back. And there's some that say that those things are, the loss of those things are the reason why the magic has left the land. Your results may vary. I'm only here to tell you to blabber on at the mouth and hopefully provide some entertainment. This is the Dungeon Master's Guides for Core Rulebook for version 3.5. Wait, version 3.5. Shouldn't we talk about version 3.1? In 2000, Dungeons and Dragons was purchased from TSR. Well, it was earlier than that, but the first version, not from TSR, came out. The first version by Wizards of the Coast came out in 2000. That was third edition. I've got my player's handbook on the end table over there. In 2003, they came out with version 3.5. I don't have a player's handbook for 3.5, so I'm showing you the Dungeon Master's Guide. Even though I don't have a player's book for 3.5, I know enough about it, and there is character generation rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide, just not as fleshed out, because obviously they assume you know what the heck you're doing because you're the Dungeon Master, not just the player. But still, you have enough here that if you're experienced, you can get along with just the Dungeon Master's Guide, even if you don't have the player's manual. Anyway. So that's right on the 20-year nostalgia loop for us. So then again, the same core abilities, generated in the same core way, affecting the same core mechanic in the same core way. Yes, it'll be calculated differently. Yes, the modifiers will be calculated differently, but essentially the thing that's happening at Bedrock is the same. And it doesn't stick to the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Because this system has been around and Dungeons and Dragons has been so ubiquitous and so popular, this system, especially when it got to that third edition, here's Silver Age Sentinels, the ultimate D20 superhero RPG. When they came out with this third edition, when Wizards of the Coast came out with this third edition, this is this 20-year nostalgia loop. I told you in this Wizards of the Coast thing in 2023, all everyone's been talking about is everyone going to war with Wizards of the Coast and everything because they were gonna take this famous OG, this open gaming license, and they were gonna get rid of it. Well, it turns out they actually have now ultimately not gotten rid of it. And in fact, they took their fifth edition rule set that was new in 2015 and did a gimme to the community and put that and made that Creative Commons and open source. So everything that happened in 2000 with them making their Wizards of the Coast original 3.0, basically they made their original 1.0, all their original Advanced Dungeon Dragon stuff, like kind of part of the SRD. They kind of basically made all original Dungeons and Dragons open source. They basically did it again all over again, making all 5th edition essentially open source. So you see how this has all become, it's just become the generic, like the C++ of role-playing games. Anyway, this D20 system requires the use of the Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition core books published by Wizards of the Coast. So if you have if you learn this Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition, if you learn this Dungeons and Dragons basics, you're then set up to play also a character in Silver Age Sentinels. I can also show you, where do I have it? I have Stars Without Number I had over here too. I wanted to show you because that's a space exploration game that you could easily use to play. Oh, here it is. Stars Without Number that you can easily use to play late era Dune, post death of Leto the Second Dune. And it starts, it even says, an old school grognard, that's a person who plays old school D&D or old school RPGs. If you've been playing RPGs long enough, you'll readily recognize much of this book. It draws a great deal of its inspiration from slightly streamlined take on several 1970s era RPGs. Which ones will be clear to most old school readers, and this game would not be possible without the admirable example of those games provided. This game is compatible with several early edition RPGs, even those intended for use in fantasy settings. Characters and game material can be easily ported back and forth from these games. The largest deviation is in the skill system provided in this game, though the system section of this book covers ways to reduce or eliminate the roll of skills. A Stars Without Number character can usually be dropped into most old school content, read D&D, without more than a cosmetic tweak of their saving throw category names. In addition to the usual elements expected of a retro-inspired game, Stars Without Number also includes mechanics for developing player-controlled factions and domains and creating sandbox-friendly worlds for PCs to discover. Calendar year on this game is 2010, 2012, Sine Nomine Publishing. It was written by a lovely individual by the name of Kevin Crawford. Why do I say lovely individual? This is the full game, Stars Without Number. You can get a free PDF of, I think it's like 80% of the material for free. Just look up Kevin Crawford, Stars Without Number, free PDF, and you can have, it's 2010 through 2012. That's on the 10-year nostalgia loop. You can definitely use that for anything for the 2013 if you're using a 10-year nostalgia loop. Absolutely, you could. And their character generation, six attributes: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma. Yep. Seen those before. And how are they generated? Rolling your attributes. The first step in creating your character is to determine your character's attributes. You roll 6 dice and you generate a score between 3 and 18. And depending on your score, it's going to be a modifier up or down, right? Just like every other game of a D&D. Of course, the character will go in different directions because it starts with a number, not D&D. But the point is this: the ground floor, and the point is also this. That's a free PDF. Also, the original SRD, the original 1.0 Wizards of the Coast OGL, that original SRD, that was 2000. So that's basically all of the original Dungeons and Dragons without the role playing game instructions. It's all just the data. But if you are a gamer, like if you know what it is, then you'll be able to work off of it. But if you're not, if let me show you this. This is White Box Fantasy Medieval Adventure Game. This is like, technically not, this is from 2017, but this is essentially, old school Dungeons and Dragons. You know what I mean? So if the core character generation system, it's basically the same. Now, am I telling you to use this? No, I would prefer that you didn't. But there are certain games like it that are specifically designed to emulate specific, core products. Like there's a game called, I think it's called Bloomhole Rules, or it's called Bloomhole Prentice Rules, and that specifically emulates the Bloomhome edition of Dungeons and Dragons that I think was from like 1980, or I think it might have been an earlier set. So that if you know that you've got a retro clone that's specifically like the Bloomhome edition that specifically emulates a specific edition of the game from a specific earlier year, you know, and if you have questions about like whether or not like I think it like passes muster, you could always ask me like in the comment section, or send me a DM, or an email or whatever. But you're pretty safe. Also, a lot of this stuff, like a lot of the PDFs of these things, like people have scanned these things. Also, if you go to a place like Drive Through RPG, a lot of the PDFs of a lot of these things are available. If you have no problem working with a PDF, a lot of them are available. At relatively, depending on your definition of economical, relatively economical means. I don't necessarily would tell anyone like the 1983 Frank Menster version of Dungeons and Dragons. If you don't have an original version laying around, on the collector's market, things like that, I haven't looked at, they can get they can get pricey, and I wouldn't tell people to get like. I'm not, there's nothing about the system that I use that says like you have to have like an original book, or it has to be an old book that has had hands on it since 1982, or it's got to be original material or whatever. No, like the biggest thing for me is that the whole point is that you're looking at something that was like could have been, that you're trying to emulate experiences that could have happened in like 1983. So the whole point of my thing is not that I'm trying to recreate things that I experienced in 1983 to bring me back to a specific point in 1983. It's the fact that I'm trying to recreate moments that could have happened in 1983 in order to recreate a virtual another 1983 in order to kind of break time, or like I don't know, like it's or fuck around and see what happens if you do that. It's there's like it's like a lot of like non-assumptions of what may or may not happen. I don't know. Anyway, da 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 da. Let me do this. Oh, quick. Here's the story. Burroughs didn't ever want to associate with famous rock stars, but they came to find him. More often than not, with Burroughs' friend arranging the introduction. At his 70th birthday party in New York in 1984, side note, that means in 1983 on our 40-year nostalgia loop, he would have been 69, dude. He spoke briefly with Sting and Andy Summers from the Police. then one of the biggest bands in the world, and had his photograph taken with them for the New York Post. Later, Bill warned some of the other guests who might have been carrying drugs. I don't know whether you're holding, but someone told me that those guys were cops. William Burroughs, ladies and gentlemen, you gotta love the guy. You gotta love the guy. Also, fuck you, Sting. You know what I mean? It really just nails it. That William Burroughs, upon meeting Andy's whatever's face, that fucking guy, and Sting from the police, like, absolutely walked away saying, warning other people at the party, those guys might be cops. You know what? William Burroughs, I'm not going to go with the assumption that he wasn't, that he was mistaken. I love you, I love you, I love you. If nobody told you they loved you today, William Burroughs warned you. Watch out for Sting. That guy might be a cop. Sting, despite always making reggae kind of music, I was thinking I couldn't remember him ever working because he made a record in like 2008 with Shaggy. Remember Shaggy, Mr. Boombastic? It wasn't me, that guy. And I was thinking about it. I was like, hey, did Sting ever work with like a bona fide reggae musician before Shaggy? And then I was like, holy goddamn, did he ever? And I'm like thinking to myself, like, goddamn, that's like fucking crazy because like Sting was like that whole like the Police were like basically a reggae cover band. And then I'm like, that's so fucking telling. Like, I can't think of like one reggae superstar that was ever like, yo, I'm here with Sting. Can you? I think it wasn't until like 2008 till 2012 that anyone even remotely associated with Jamaican music decided to sit down with Sting and fucking do something, and it was fucking Shaggy. And FY in the case you're curious, Shaggy's fucking American. He served in the fucking first Gulf War. Mr. Boombastic, it wasn't me. Not anymore, it wasn't. Because you worked for fucking Sting. And you should check out that record. I heard that record from start to finish. It was on one of my fucking loops or some shit. I guarantee you, it's no motherfucking reason I would have. Yoy. Driving by, love you long time. Not until prove it. Double dog dare you to listen to that record, Sting and Shaggy. You know what I mean? And how did that not make the papers? Yo, I love you, I love you, I love you. If no one told you they loved you today, busting out. Next time you see me, I'm gonna be up on Twitch, streaming like this. Where should we go? Should we go to the left or the right? Left? I don't know. Gonna teach you how to attach spells to Pac-Man. Do not miss Pac-Man. She's from 1985. Fuck that shit. Can't get down with that. I love you. Okay? Be good to each other. Be good to me. Huh? Ah. Come on. I'm trying to think. Yo. Here we go. And the card that I picked that last time I couldn't figure out what it was, Bondage. That's their version of this is Mrs. Fantastic. Lucy Cavendish is getting crazy. That was her version of the devil. She changed the devil to Bondage. Crazy gal. So we're gonna do another one with this 2003 Bow to the Heck deck. I don't know what's going on with this deck. Why it's so like that? Come on now. Come on, Hay House. I don't know. I normally don't get down with the hay, and I think this is why. Do they have a reputation? Yo, man, I don't even know. Yo, I don't even know. I'm having a feeling. I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna call this like hay quality, man. I don't know. I've never messed with hay house like Oracle decks. I'm having a feeling like this is like some. I'm not even liking this. Hey, Rimsey, what's going on? It's okay. You know, actually, technically, Rimsey, you're right on time for you. I didn't think I hope that you're right on. Actually, Rimsey, we're not surprised at all. Oh, look who it is! It's Rimsey. Oh, oh, you're sorry you're late. It's fascinating. It's interesting that you're so sorry. It's something you're so evidently fantastic at. Well, gee, we have this. I thought I needed an Oracle deck from 2003, so I got the Oracle Tarot, which is this is just basically a Tarot deck. It's she Lucy Cavendish decided in 2003 to lose the court cards as there was enough personal energy for people in the trumps. She also changed the name of two of the cards, including the devil that we saw yesterday, as bondage. So I'm not crazy about the quality of the cards. The cards are very much sticky to each other, but we're just going to go with it. What do I got? Up. Oh, the one good thing I like is this is that there's a lot of words on those. So I think this is what we like about that, why they're calling it an oracle deck, is because oracle style in the sense that there's just a lot given to the novice reader in the sense there's a lot of words right there on the card. Balance, harmony, temperance. So we got the temperance card. This is temperance, and they give us that extra data right there on the card. Balance, harmony. Now, like with doing that, obviously they take us in a specific direction. It is absolutely beautiful. They take us in a specific direction, but that's okay when the direction is there. And I like this. And what I like this is for this moment and for us here now. What I'm seeing for and how I'm reading it is me figuring out the balance of allowing the videos to just be what they are again and not having to be any previously expected or defined, you know, previous set piece or designed script that I don't have to that I can go and just let the stream breathe and just let the thing happen and not worry about every single time defining every key term of the meta RPG ad nauseum. That I can accept the fact that some videos can just be people in the audience are going to know enough, and those that don't know, and they're just going to have to find out somewhere else. So if you're here to just talk about this, that, and the other, then talk about this, that, and the other. And we'll get to the meat and potatoes of what needs to be redirected and the housekeeping of going back to the brass tacks and laying out the ABCs and one, two, threes of the system if and when we figure out that the time has come for us to revisit those brass tacks and ABCs and one, two, threes of that. But that is part of the finding of the balance and the harmony and the understanding that now is not the time for that. That now is the time for saying to folks, hey, I'm learning as I'm doing, and it's not a set system that I'm coming to you and saying, this is how it is, and it's all written out, and I'm explaining to you this and explaining to you. Part of the reason that sounds confusing is I'm confused by it. I'm reading you a tarot card, and I'm not one of these tarot card readers that says the tarot works like this, and there's a metaphysical energy that underpins everything, and the cards know. I'm not the guy that says that. But I am the guy that says that my phone is now telling me that I'm at low power. And I've been streaming for an hour on a phone. So God bless you. Goddess bless you. May the lords and ladies of the universe, imaginary or otherwise, keep you in their embrace. And if that embrace is merely a figment of my imagination communicated to your imagination, let the knowledge that there's another person out there that cares enough to send a thought your way, that thought may be of some comfort to you. Because that's the only comfort I can be to you now at this moment, at this time. Love ya. Have a happy night yourself, Reemsy. I love you, I love you, I love you. If nobody told you they loved you, someone just did. That's somebody, CW Chanter, Cable Guy Incognito. Call me what you will. Just call me all the time. Call me Hot for Teacher. I love you. I'll talk to y'all again real soon. Chant every day. Play Meta RPG every day. Read a spiritual text every day. Do it all.